It's that time of year, graduation season, but is your grad prepared for the future? Our next guest says probably not. In fact, a new report from PricewaterhouseCoopers shows a global shift to artificial intelligence is going to render about 40% of today's jobs obsolete by the year 2030. Let's get into it with Ravi Hutheesing. I know I screwed that up. He's a cultural diplomat working with the U.S. Department of State and an international education speaker. How do you pronounce it, Ravi?
You know, you did a really good job. A lot better than most. So Hutheesing would be ideal, but you did a great job.
Well, Ravi, are schools training students for jobs that just aren't going to be there in 15 to 20 years?
Well, no, that's the problem. And the truth is we don't know what the jobs are going to be in 15 to 20 years. So what we have to do is train our students to be able to pivot. And being able to pivot is such an important skill. In fact, I'm writing a book about it because that's been the fundamental basis of my own life and my own story. And, you know, as you just mentioned in that study, if 38% of jobs are going to be automated in the next 10 years, well, we have to be training students in order to make that pivot. I think they're employable now, but what happens in that time frame? That same study, by the way, says that the half-life of a tech skill is only 4 years. So we've got to make sure that these students are prepared not just for their first job, but to be able to have a career.
Well, you're talking about pivoting. Then, Ravi, does that mean the schools need to change their curriculum in the process?
Well, you know, it's interesting. The schools themselves need to pivot. But one of the things that I believe strongly is that we don't actually need major school reform. I believe that small shifts in education makes big changes in the world. And there are a lot of things that schools are doing right, in fact, but there's a narrative out there, you know, public school is broken and public education needs to be reformed, and schools are responding to it. And to be honest, I'm concerned that the response might break education in the process.
You say in the future, cultural competence will become the most important skill for success. What exactly is that, and how do we teach it?
Right. Well, you know, our students are graduating and going into a complete globalized world. Not only through technology, but the reality is we travel much and we're much more integrated societies. So cultural competence is really important. And what that means is that we have to understand our own implicit biases in order to understand our own cultural biases and upbringing before we can start to understand others. And then we can begin to become more compassionate and have more empathy and be better collaborators in the future. And yes, how do we teach it? I actually think that one of the things I say in my keynotes, and by the way, I was the keynote speaker at the Colorado Association of School Executives back in 2017. And one of the things I said there was that, you know, we don't have to teach cultural competence. What we have to do is unteach cultural incompetence. We're naturally born to be quite competent and curious and open-minded about each other. So if we can create the environments, and I believe public education, just by the nature of inclusion, creates an environment where students can become more culturally competent, it's actually a very organic process.
I'm wondering, is there still value in a liberal arts education, or vocational schools may be better post-secondary?
Yeah, so I'm a big believer in liberal arts, and it's for that reason. In a vocational setting or career pathway setting, we really run that risk of students not being able to pivot. It is those liberal arts types of education that give students the breadth. And one of the things I also like to say in my keynotes is that artificial intelligence understands depth, but it doesn't understand breadth. And that's really what liberal arts does.
All right, Ravi, we're going to run at that. Thanks so much for the time.
Thanks so much. I appreciate it.